This is Entertainment for Review, and we're going to be looking at another episode of The Big Bang Theory. Today's episode is Season 3, Episode 21, The Plimpton Stimulation. The episode gets this title because Sheldon has a visitor to their apartment, Dr. Plimpton. Now, personally for me, this is not one of my favorite episodes in the series, but let's go ahead and take a look at it. The episode does have a pretty decent intro. They're in the cafeteria, and they're all sitting down for lunch, and when Raj is approaching the table, he sneezes. This causes Sheldon to immediately worry that he's sick and wants him to sit at another table. Raj looks to Leonard and Howard for help, but then when he sneezes again, they say he's on his own.
Sheldon, come on. Yeah, it's just one sneeze. You're on your own. See you, buddy.
So Raj reluctantly sits at another table nearby. At this point, then Leonard gives Sheldon his notice that's required in the roommate agreement. He gives him 24-hour notice that he's going to be having a non-related female guest in the apartment for 2 nights. And that guest is Dr. Plimpton. Everybody is a bit shocked that Sheldon knows her and that he's going to be having a female guest in the apartment and that she's going to be sleeping in his room. Until he clarifies that he won't be sleeping in the room with her. He is simply coming to town and apparently does not like hotel rooms. And Sheldon's leaving the cafeteria. Raj asks when he can sit with them again, and Sheldon says he needs to have 2 negative throat cultures spaced 12 hours apart. One other fun thing I noticed in this scene that I hadn't noticed when watching before is the weird branding in The Big Bang Theory on their drinks. Raj has a can of Fanta on his lunch tray, which is completely normal, but both Howard and Sheldon have bottles of water that have no labels on them. And Leonard has a bottle of water on his tray that is clearly a Fiji water, although his bottle says BG water. Back at his apartment building, Sheldon bumps into Penny when heading upstairs and says that he's going to be having a female guest. She too is baffled by this. Sheldon reveals that he's bought some feminine products, or things that he thinks are feminine products, for his female guest. When it's time for Dr. Plimpton to be arriving, Leonard is trying to show off by wearing a suit, make himself look smart. Sheldon specifies that this is his guest. And Dr. Plimpton does arrive and they all make their introductions, and Leonard is stumbling over his words because he's nervous. I don't know if it's to make him feel better, but then she rambles on a little bit and then says she's rambling and repeats what he had misspoken. They continue to talk until Sheldon tells her he'll show her to her room, and he takes her to his room and describes the various features of his room. Here that she makes a subtle inquiry about Leonard's relationship status. Of course, any hidden meaning here goes right over Sheldon's head.
What's his relationship status?
And he just answers the question straightforward. Mentions that he had been dating Penny across the hall, but not any longer. Later that night, she comes to Leonard's room and finds him reading her book, and proceeds to not so subtly at all seduce Leonard. As they try to make Leonard seem like someone who's not very good with women, he actually has a lot of success in this show. I guess that's to show his character development. Well, as we'll see with Dr. Plimpton, it actually didn't take that much for something to happen with her, and it wasn't going to lead anywhere to a relationship or anything like that. See the next morning when Sheldon is waking up in the living room, and Leonard and Dr. Plimpton come out. They're both a little bit giggly. Sheldon just seems to laugh along with. He then arrives and asks for a ride to work because her car is out of gas. After some brief introductions and interaction, it doesn't take her long to realize that Leonard and Dr. Plimpton had slept together. And when she leaves the room, she confronts Leonard about it, saying they had just broken up. Sheldon is insulted by the very insinuation until Leonard confirms it, and then he's just angry that it had happened.
It already happened.
That's preposterous. Tell her, Leonard.
Well,
No.
And Penny gets mad and leaves and decides just to take the bus to work. Once at work in the cafeteria, Leonard is trying to brag to Howard and Raj about what happened the night before and is trying to give them hints which they are just not getting. In their defense, this is probably not something they figured would ever happen to Leonard or to themselves. They are eventually joined by Sheldon and Dr. Plimpton. Leonard, trying to drop more hints, says he's very tired and asks her if she is as well, and she says she is and asks them to get her some coffee. He asks if she wants it black, like she said she had in the morning. She says she wants it brown and sweet while looking at Raj. We then jump to Howard arriving at Raj's apartment for Halo Night, which they moved there because Raj has been sick. Raj is trying to get Howard to leave because he's saying he's too sick to have Halo Night, but it's really because Dr. Plimpton is inside the apartment and he wants to be alone. But it turns out that's not what Dr. Plimpton wants, so she says to let Howard in and stay. And it turns out that this Dr. Plimpton is even more amorous than anybody ever thought, because she now wants them both to engage in some sort of fantasy role-playing game together. They both seem kind of uncomfortable with, and it gets even worse when Leonard arrives, making things more awkward for them, but even better for Dr. Plimpton, who's excited, saying now she wants them all 3 to engage in this game with her, which is just too weird for words. Raj tries to see who's game for this, and Howard raises his hand at first until Leonard points out a very obvious fact. This will involve them all being naked in front of each other, and Howard says he's out. Raj thinks up an excuse to get Howard and Leonard to be able to leave the apartment, and then turns around, locks the door, and apparently is going to continue in the game for himself. And we end the episode with Leonard back at the apartment trying to talk to Penny and explain what happened. She basically says that he doesn't owe her any explanation, and he says he wants to try, but his best explanation is basically he did what he did because she let him. Overall, this episode is one of those episodes that's just kind of here. It doesn't really do much to advance the storyline at all. It does, of course, continue to reference Leonard and Penny's breakup, and even shows that Penny is a little bit upset that Leonard seems to have moved on quicker than she has. I think most people assume Penny would be the first one to move on and be with someone else after their breakup. As always, I like Sheldon's part in this episode and his awkward interactions trying to host a female guest. Overall, I just don't really like the overall story in this episode. I don't like that we have this creepy professor moving from guy to guy in the group, and even trying to sleep with them all at the same time. Although it does does allow Raj to have a little bit of success, as he's usually the least successful with women in the show. I do think it's odd that he was ready to sleep with a woman who Leonard had just slept with previously, not even a day before. That's just a weird dynamic altogether. An interesting thing that we do get from this episode is we learn that Howard and Bernadette had broken up. Dr. Plimpton was trying to engage both Howard and Raj. Raj asks about Howard's girlfriend, and he says we broke up weeks ago. That makes sense because we haven't seen Bernadette in several episodes at this point. So overall, this episode's not bad. Like I said in the beginning, it's just not one of my favorites. I would score this episode at about a 6 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts on The Big Bang Theory Season 3, Episode 21, The Plimpton Stimulation, in the comments section below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep an eye out for my next video coming soon.